Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are plunging into, well, a question that I think touches everyone. What does it truly mean to feel settled, peaceful, completely at home within yourself?
Right. Not just, comfortable in your actual house, but fundamentally okay, wherever you are, whatever's happening.
Exactly. And we're doing this by drawing from some really insightful source material excerpts from a book exploring this very journey towards inner peace.
Yeah. And it brings together some philosophical ideas, some very practical ways of looking at ourselves, and also some really powerful real life stories.
So our mission today is really to unpack these sources, get to the heart of what they're saying. Like, what are the forces that pull us away from that feeling of being at home?
And crucially, what's the path back, according to this material? It suggests it's not about finding something brand new, but more about recognizing something that's already there.
hmm It sounds like these sources are challenging that common idea that peace or happiness comes from, external achievements or getting more stuff.
Absolutely. They suggest the real shift has to happen internally. It's about understanding ourselves and maybe our relationship with the world differently.
Okay, so let's start where the sources do by looking at the problem they identify. They paint this picture of our culture, describing this pervasive tendency to look outside ourselves for everything, meaning purpose, happiness.
Yeah, that constant striving, what can I get? Or obsessing over where will I be next? That kind of thing.
And this external focus, this always looking ahead, it creates what the source calls a perpetual future.
Right. We tell ourselves, okay, when I finish this big project or, when the kids are grown
When
or
we've paid off the mortgage, we've all heard that one.
exactly, then I'll relax, then I'll finally be happy.
But the source points out something, and I think many of us feel this when you finally get to that future point you were aiming for. Well, there's rarely that big sense of arrival, is there?
No big fanfare.
Yeah.
Maybe just a quick pause before the mind grabs onto the next thing you think you need or want.
Or, if you're not stuck in the future, you're maybe replaying the past, dwelling on regrets or past hurts, what should have happened.
Either way, you're not really here, are you? Not present.
And the sources make a really deep connection here. They link this external focus, this disconnection from the present moment, to what they call a very Western idea of the soul residing in our thinking minds.
Yes. They argue this perspective shifted our main way of operating,
Mhm.
moved it away from something more intuitive, maybe spiritual,
Toward what? Logic.
towards being dominated by logic, analysis, judgment,
Yeah.
that kind of processing.
Which sounds useful. I mean, logic is useful.
Yeah.
But the sources argue it traps us in dualistic thinking.
Yeah, everything becomes an opposition, this or that, good or bad, right or wrong, black and white.
And the crucial insight here, according to the source, is that living almost exclusively in the head, well, despite all our amazing cultural and technical progress, it hasn't actually delivered a perfect world.
Far from it. In fact, they argue it's arguably led to significant damage, environmentally and also within ourselves. There's that David Suzuki quote they cite. It's pretty stark.
Which one was that?
We're in a giant car heading towards a brick wall and everyone's arguing over where they're going to sit.
Wow, that's a powerful image. It makes me think of that feeling. You know, when you were a kid, maybe lost in a supermarket, that sudden, intense panic.
Mm-hmm.
The source suggests something of that feeling can actually linger into adulthood, even when we, geographically know exactly where we are.
That lingering sense of being lost,
Yeah.
even when you're a capable adult,
Mm.
that's the feeling of not knowing your way back to yourself. It's not about finding your keys or your car.
It's about not knowing where home with a capital H is inside you.
Exactly.
Okay, so if that's the problem, always looking outside, trapped in our thinking minds, what's the way out? This is where the sources bring in a metaphor that I found really, really insightful. The pendulum.
Yes, and this idea apparently came from a really tough personal experience for the author. A severe stress-related illness landed them in hospital. Intense mental and physical agony.
Right. And in that state, with nowhere left to run from the pain, this image of a pendulum they'd used before therapeutically just popped into their mind.
And the base of the pendulum, in this metaphor, represents the mind and body completely caught up in those extreme swings, the highs, the lows, intense emotions, pain, terror.
Like Graham described feelings, swinging between dark passion and cold indifference, just agony.
Yeah, and the revelation, the insight, was this. The only way out of that suffering, those exhausting, violent swings, it wasn't trying to stop them from the bottom. It was by moving up the pendulum shaft.
Climbing up towards the stillness at the very top, what they call the absolute calm.
Right. The higher you climb, the less those dramatic swings down to the bottom affect you. They still happen, but they don't throw you around as much.
So the pendulum isn't just about finding balance at the bottom.
No, it becomes a kind of vehicle to transcend the mind and body. And the first step in climbing up is observation, awareness.
So from that calmer perspective, higher up, you can just watch your thoughts and feelings go by without getting totally swept away.
Exactly. You observe them objectively. And here's a really interesting point the source makes. External forces, things like the constant churn of politics or the economy, they seem to almost actively work to keep us stuck down at the base of that pendulum.
How so?
Well, they kind of depend on us being driven by a sense of need or maybe fear.
Yeah.
Think about news cycles, often focusing on threats, anxieties,
Yeah.
constantly swinging you between worry and maybe some temporary relief.
That example after September 11th they mention, the constant threat band on the TV news.
Yeah. Subtly conditioning with yellow, then hitting you with red fear. It keeps people feeling dependent, maybe a bit lost, and definitely less likely to start climbing that shaft towards inner calm.
Because, as the source puts it so bluntly, those who trade in products, services, even ideologies, they kind of fear that inner calm.
Why? Because you can't please a pleased. It's hard to sell something to someone who is already content, right? If you're peaceful inside, you're much less susceptible to being told what you desperately need to buy or who you absolutely must be afraid of today.
So the core teaching of this pendulum idea is really about choice.
Absolutely. Do you live from that victimized base, constantly reacting, tossed around by influences and your own inner turmoil? Or do you learn to access and live from that absolute calm at the top?
And the source is careful here. They clarify this isn't about achieving some state of permanent happiness.
Right. Happiness is an emotion. It comes and goes. It's part of the swing down at the base. But the permanent state is within you already. That's the truth of who you are. That's home.
And when you're rooted there at home, which they describe as permanent, still peaceful, then you're much more at ease with the world outside changing all the time.
You understand, maybe on a deeper level, that everything you truly need is already right here.
Yeah.
And from that place, you feel content.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, but it's definitely related to that mind-focused view we were talking about. The source really digs into what it calls mind games.
Yeah, they describe the mind as this ingenious tool, which it absolutely is, but they warn that we've often elevated it to the position of our God.
And it creates this like faux sense of freedom. We think because we can generate endless thoughts, we must be free.
But the mind is constantly constructing realities, often automatically, without us even realizing. You hear one thing, then another, and boom, your mind instantly runs a new computation, filtering it through everything you already think, believe, fear.
And the source highlights something I think we can all relate to. When we're tired or stressed, the mind defaults even more heavily to memory and familiar patterns, habits, even addiction.
Yeah, why? Because it's just less energetically demanding than taking in and processing entirely new input. It's like that analogy they use, two mirrors facing each other.
What does that mean?
It's like the mind receives information, reflects it back and forth internally based on past data, and then projects a version of that same old image back out onto the world. An endless loop.
The story they share about the patient with kleptomania is a pretty vivid example of that.
Right. Stealing something small like an eraser, then escalating to stealing the clock off the wall. It wasn't about logic or needing the object.
It was the mind creating a sensation it liked.
Exactly. A sensation it enjoyed, which then became this ingrained habit, overriding their well-being, their values, everything.
And the key lesson there, according to the source, seems to be twofold. First, really listen. Take people seriously when they tell you something feels fundamentally wrong inside them.
Mm-hmm. And second, maybe accept that, as the source puts it, we're all a bit crazy. Even seemingly irrational fears or behaviors, they're happening, often in those hidden recesses of people's private lives, driven by these mind games.
They also bring up the classic film Gaslight.
Yeah, and the case study of Andrew, to show how one mind can systematically manipulate another, that gaslighting.
Which can lead to just profound confusion, self-doubt, and in Andrew's case, even physical illness. His adult-onset asthma.
Fascinatingly, it cleared up after he left that relationship where his partner was constantly undermining him.
That story really hits home how unreliable the mind can be sometimes, how easily it can accept faulty narratives, even ones that are causing us real harm. Andrew trusted his intellect, right?
Yeah, his brilliant mind. But he had to confront the fact that it had constructed this very confused and damaging reality for him.
And this ties into the source's critique of what they call the cult of I.
That's the identity we build based on labels. what we think about ourselves or our current emotional state. Like Jack, the guy who defined himself so rigidly as a generous man.
That label, which sounds positive, actually became a trap for him.
Completely. It prevented him from expressing authentic feelings, like maybe wanting to tell someone to, well, go to hell, because it just didn't fit his self-defined identity. He felt stuck.
The conversation they recount with the mother and her 11-year-old son, Oscar, is incredibly revealing here.
Oh, yeah. When asked what's left if you take away all the labels, good boy, clever, naughty, all of it,
What did Oscar say?
he just saw just the person. The same. Simple as that.
Wow. Out of the mouth of babes, like you said earlier.
Exactly. The source uses this to show how kids often have this intuitive connection to a deeper truth. But our culture, this cult of I, actively teaches us to distrust that simple understanding, dismisses it as naive or immature.
And instead recruits us into building these complex identities based purely on thoughts and labels.
Right. So the point is, when the mind is allowed to be king, when we aren't rooted in that deeper knowing of the self, it literally just makes stuff up. It constructs these elaborate narratives.
Which can have devastating personal outcomes, convincing us of things that just aren't true. Whether they're self-deprecating stories or overly positive ones that aren't grounded, either way, keeping us trapped in illusions. Like Kitty, who had all the outward signs of success.
But was completely lost in internal misery.
Yeah. And speaking of outward markers, the sources discuss the cultural obsession with success itself as a major trap.
Right, often presented as both a carrot, something to strive for, and a whip, something to fear falling short of.
Yeah. The story of the author's failing business is a great example. Their peers saw it purely as a failure, based on a very fixed, very Western definition.
But then someone in the U.S. saw it completely differently.
Totally differently. Relabeled it as a success, an education. Even suggested they needed 2 more failures to truly know what they were doing.
That really challenges our rigid, success-failure binary thinking.
It highlights how these definitions are just mind-made constructs. They're not inherent truths about the situation.
Brian's case study is another powerful illustration of this success trap.
His whole idea of a successful life revolved around having biological children. So when faced with infertility, he was just utterly devastated.
Couldn't reconcile reality with his fixed mental blueprint. He really struggled with the idea of using donor sperm. Yeah, immensely. But his intense suffering, however difficult it was, ultimately became the catalyst for change. It forced him to question those rigid, mind-created beliefs about what a successful life even was.
He realized he could actually change his mind.
Exactly. He saw that a different path wasn't a lesser one, just different. And the source also mentions Ursula, briefly. Her outwardly perfect life was shown to be quite fragile when health issues hit. It highlights how focusing only on the external can build a very brittle sense of self.
Okay, so if the mind is often playing games, creating illusions, and external success is kind of a trap, where do we turn for a more grounded reality?
Well, the sources make a compelling case for shifting our attention, moving it away from the dominance of the thinking mind and reconnecting with the body and the senses.
They describe living exclusively in the head, lost in thought, as being like sleepwalking.
Yeah. You're physically moving through life, but it's habitual. You're relying on stale memories, old interpretations, rather than actually experiencing each moment freshly. That friend on the hill example.
Oh, the one who looked at the amazing view.
The magnificent, ever-changing view and just said, but we saw this yesterday. It's kind of sad, isn't it? Totally lost in memory, not present experience.
And this mind dominance actually dulls our senses too, they say.
Absolutely. We walk through bustling cities, crowded trains, and barely notice the smells, the subtle sounds, the textures. We're just lost in our internal dream worlds.
So the source introduces the body, not just as, a biological machine.
No, much more poetically. As a child of love, a loyal friend. It's the vehicle that gives us this whole experience of being human, and it occupies this unique space, kind of sitting between the thinking mind and the deeper self.
They also share that fascinating perspective from Chinese tradition, seeing the mind as more than just the brain.
Right. It's seen as the cumulative activity of the organs. The liver plans, the heart holds love, the kidneys are connected to knowing truth. It gives these organs such profound importance, way beyond just their basic physical function.
So what's the practical takeaway here?
Actively reacquainting yourself with your senses. That's a really powerful way to shift your attention out of the thinking mind loop and into the present moment.
Like really smell things, taste intentionally.
Yeah. Look and listen as if you've just landed from Mars. Be totally present to the physical sensations.
And what happens when you do that? The source says that fully feeling and experiencing what's happening physically now.
It automatically stops thinking. It's a direct route out of the mind's chatter and into the reality of the present moment.
And this focus on the body and senses seems to lead naturally into the concept of natural law.
Exactly, which the source introduces through a kind of beginner's guide to Taoism. The core idea is studying nature through direct observation, using your senses, understanding the interconnectedness of everything.
Seeing humans not as separate from the universe, but as integral parts of it. Cogs in the machine, sort of.
And realizing that the ultimate source of life, the Tao often described as pure awareness, is perfect, formless, eternal. From the source, life emerges through these fundamental patterns.
Like yin-yang, the law of opposites.
Right. And the law of 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, water. These are seen as fundamental patterns in nature, like the seasons, and these same energies manifest within us.
So these elements create our basic makeup, and imbalances cause problems.
Pretty much. Imbalances in these energies lead to disharmony or specific character traits and reactions we might see in ourselves or others.
The source gives some quick examples using case studies, right?
Yeah. Wood, for instance, is about growth,
Mm.
planning. An imbalance can swing from timidity, like not being able to move forward, to aggression or explosive anger. Alice and Chris were the example.
His aggression met by her passivity, which later flipped into timid Alice versus angry Alice.
Exactly. The fire that's connected to joy, connection, propriety. An imbalance might look like Anna, who struggled deeply with emotional intimacy. She was always seeking validation and love externally because she couldn't really access or accept it from within.
Earth relates to satisfaction, the balance of giving and receiving, integrity.
And Daniel, the singer, exemplified imbalance there. Constant worry, mentally filing away memories instead of processing them, and literally choking on the emotional care offered by friends. His voice would just seize up.
Metal is about letting go, inner value, inspiration.
Right. Blinda's struggle with self-harm and that profound lack of self-worth after her family collapsed around her, it's presented as a metal imbalance.
And finally, water,
Yeah.
linked to survival, knowing the self, fearlessness.
Michael, the judo expert and stuntman, showed strong water energy, especially his ability to disengage from a racing mind after trauma like his father disappearing. He'd ground himself in physical tasks like counting bricks on a wall, just disengaging from the mind chatter.
Understanding these elemental dynamics sounds really powerful. It reframes things we often see as just fixed flaws or that's just how I am.
Absolutely. An imbalance creates specific triggers and predictable reactions, like the author's fire element being triggered by an upsetting email, leading to that familiar surge of anger.
But the insight is recognizing that pattern, feeling that surge. Doesn't mean you have to react, right?
Exactly. You can choose to observe it. From that calmer perspective, up the pendulum shaft.
Yeah.
That observation helps release you from being automatically controlled by these ingrained elemental reactions.
And this idea of aligning with natural rhythms also extends to something very practical they mention. The law of midday midnight, the Chinese clock.
Yeah, it's basically a guide to how energy flows through our body's organ systems over a 24-hour cycle.
Each organ or function has a peak energy window.
Right, a 2-hour window throughout the day and night. For instance, lungs and large intestine are strongest early morning, stomach and spleen mid-morning, heart and small intestine around midday, and so on through the cycle.
And the source really emphasizes that violating this natural law puts stress on the system.
Huge stress, like the stage manager example, eating nothing all day, then a massive meal at midnight, or consistently sleeping badly. It throws everything off balance.
So the key is learning to listen to your body's actual needs and rhythms, not just the mind's ideas about routine.
Precisely. Tuning into the innate intelligence of your body, which is already aligned with nature, rather than trying to force it into external schedules dictated by the mind.
Okay, so we've covered challenging that fixed idea of I, understanding the mind's games, looking at character through elements, aligning with natural laws. Where does this journey ultimately lead, according to these sources?
It leads back home. Climbing those steps of the pendulum, moving through understanding the mind, then the body, brings you closer to the world of home.
Which is described as, what, permanent peace, stillness?
Yeah, a place where the swings of the pendulum are negligible. They just don't really affect that core stillness.
And at the heart of this home is love.
Yes, the source presents love not just as an emotion, but as the source itself. The tail. Grace. Something permanent, unconditional, the fundamental truth of who we are. As the ancient Chinese saw it, love is the benevolent act of creation itself.
And this seems to be where the concept of forgiveness finds its deepest meaning in the source material.
Right. It's presented not as something the perpetrator necessarily deserves, but as this radical gift the victim gives to themselves.
A path to healing, freedom.
Exactly. Reclaiming your own inner power. Sandra's story with her difficult neighbors is a simple but clear example. Instead of staying consumed by anger,
She retreated inside, accepted their behavior as just behavior, and found peace. And from that peace, she could assert herself appropriately.
in Catherine's story, leaving an abusive marriage is maybe even more powerful. She regained her strength, physically and mentally, and eventually found it within herself to forgive her ex-husband, not for him.
But for her own freedom, to release herself from carrying that heavy shadow.
Precisely. The sources also highlight how much of our difficulty in relationships actually comes from our own mind games and projections. Jennifer's experience before her wedding.
Yes, projecting her "you don't love me" insecurity onto her fiancé's completely normal friendship with his best friend.
It's that perception is projection idea. The mind creates these elaborate fantasies, insists they're external truth, and completely obscures the real person, blocking any authentic connection, until we recognize and release those internal projections.
This whole journey, the source argues, seems to culminate in this quite radical idea they call Step 9, nothing matters.
Yeah, and that sounds potentially nihilistic, but it's not meant that way at all.
It's about understanding that beyond the mind's dualistic constructs, right and wrong, good and bad things don't matter in the way our minds tell us they do.
Exactly. True morality, they suggest, isn't some external code imposed by the mind's illusion of separation. It's the inherent knowing deep within that we are fundamentally one, that we exist by the grace of love.
Acts like murder or theft, they argue, come from that deep-seated belief in separation, from the insanity of the mind.
Not from the truth that we're all interconnected. Yeah, and
Yeah.
the case study of Anne, for me, beautifully embodies living from this place of home and understanding that nothing matters in that conventional mind-defined sense.
She was able to accept all her emotions: sadness, happiness, fear, shame, guilt, jealousy, without judging them.
Just letting them be there. She saw the inherent worth in everyone, regardless of their behavior. She was, as they put it, at peace and okay in herself no matter what she felt on the surface.
That's remarkable. She even understood that things we usually label as purely positive, like intense laughter or joy,
Could actually lead to destructive behavior if she wasn't rooted in that calm, if she was clinging to them from the base of the pendulum, needing them.
Anne's real gift, according to the source, was just being thoroughly human, accepting herself completely.
And because of that, in her presence, other people felt free to enjoy their own quirky, odd, thoroughly human selves. Because everything was welcome. There was no judgment.
So wrapping this up, what's the core takeaway from this deep dive into these sources? It feels like the journey home isn't really about acquiring your knowledge or changing everything around you.
No, it seems to be fundamentally a process of unlearning. A gentle retreat, maybe, from a limited, mind-centric way of seeing things.
Reinforcing that core message we heard earlier. Everything you need, you have.
Right. The truth of home, peace, love, it's already within you. Trying to find external fixes, even things like positive visualization, they're ultimately limited.
Because they're bound by that law of opposites. What goes up must come down.
Exactly. They're inherently temporary, part of the mind's game. The sources remind us of that.
So the real journey isn't about desperately trying to alter your outer circumstances, although that might happen naturally as a result.
It's about shifting your point of perception, shifting it to the truth of self, to home, to love, to peace. Like Robert, who, on paper, had this privileged life.
But was trapped in inner depression and guilt.
Yeah. He searched and searched for happiness and fulfillment outside himself, but of course it wasn't there. The peace he desperately needed was already within him. If only he could shift his perception to find it.
This whole exploration leaves us with something pretty powerful to consider, doesn't it? Think again about Anne, the woman living from home. She could say about feeling lonely sometimes. So lonely. But me, I'm good.
Yeah, she experienced a powerful, difficult, external emotion loneliness, yet she maintained this underlying state of inner peace and acceptance.
So what does that paradox tell us about the relationship between challenging external circumstances or difficult feelings and that possibility of inner peace? Is it truly possible, as Anne's example suggests, to be at peace and okay in spite of the storms raging on the surface?
That's a profound thought to sit with, I think.